So, as you look at some advice, some perspective, some tactics somebody shared, and they said, this worked really well for us. Going to 3 week sprint duration works much better than 2 weeks. Or starting your presentation by presenting the conclusion and the recommendation in the first slide works really well versus leaving the conclusion and recommendation for the last slide. Or writing as a way of thinking works really well. Writing is clear thinking, whatever. So we get bombarded with these types of messages from everywhere. And what most people do is they look at the name of the sender of the message. Then they look up, if they're not sure, the LinkedIn profile of the sender of the message or the net worth of the sender of the message. And they look for some markers of social proof. Then based on that, they decide how much attention to pay to this. These days, people add one other element to this. It's self-destructive, or at least it harms nobody but yourself, which is, ooh, let me figure out what the political leanings of this person are. And then based on that, I will decide the validity of their business advice. It doesn't harm anybody other than you to do that. But people do it, right? People don't understand what's actually good for them, what's truly good for them. So instead of that approach, if the question is really like, well, but how do I just judge? Because it takes a really long time. It takes a while to figure out the validity of this thing, the usefulness of this thing that I'm encountering. Well, here are two practical suggestions I will make that anybody can implement. First, let's take it as a fact that it expends just too much mental energy for to do this for everything you encounter. Let's just accept that. We don't have that much mental energy. It's finite. So what does one do when we have a finite quantity of something that we can apply towards a very large range of choices? All PMs know the answer to this question. You prioritize. You identify which one or two topics you will apply this energy towards. So first, I want you to just focus on that. What are the one or two areas where you are going to apply this energy towards? While for the rest, I want you to continue looking at the profile picture and the name and the number of followers and their net worth and how many companies they've founded and whatever else, whether Elon Musk is following them or not, blah, blah. Look at all those signifiers. For the rest, I am asking you, what are the one or two things where you won't do that, where you feel like you can and should devote some of this finite mental energy to truly evaluate the message and properly evaluate it. The answer might be different. It actually, frankly, it doesn't matter what the answer is for you. Just take the answer. For some people, it might be, you know what, for me, it's UX design, or for me, it's enterprise sales. For me, it's product management. Or no, it's narrower than product management. For me, it's about how to write great PRDs. Or for me, it's about product strategy. Or for me, it's about goal setting. For me, it's about leading complex cross-functional initiatives. Whatever the heck it might be, I have to believe that there is something which you can identify. So that's where I want you to start. Let's take the example. So I personally did this for the topic of product strategy. This is 2016, 2017, as I realized I need to get much better at product strategy, and I'm not that good. I've been fooling myself, first saying product strategy is useless, execution is everything, blah, blah, all that nonsense at Google. And then at some point I realized, oh no, actually, this is an important skill. In fact, it's a crucial skill for what I wanted to do in my career. Okay, I now understand it's a crucial skill. Then the next step is like, oh, I kind of suck at this. I spent 1 or 2 years convincing myself that of course I'm good at it because I'm so senior and I have such great jobs and, people look up to me and all of these things. But no, I'm being honest. I kind of suck at this. You have to understand, I don't have any taste yet in product strategy because without core competence, you can't have taste. Even with core competence, taste is not a given, but you can't build taste when there's no foundation of core competence. So I did not have taste. I did not have the ability to discern, like, oh, this is good, this is not good. So what I did was what anybody would do in this situation, which is, oh, let me just pick out the top books on this topic. And let me pick out the curated resources on this topic, which in my case was the HBR, Harvard Business Review book on strategy, which is basically just compilation of their most, I guess, popular HBR articles on the topic of strategy. I bought that book because when you don't have expertise and you're trying to build some context, you go to some curated resources. So that's what I did. So now I'm reading this book and I'm very open to anything that I'm reading in this book. Just like, oh yeah, this could be true, this could be true, this could be true. Sure, yeah. What I'm not doing, and this is a mistake many people make, what I'm not doing is doing a critical evaluation of what the author is saying. It's like, no, this author is wrong in this point. I see many people who are not yet by any means world class in the thing, but they point out, like, oh, this part, it's wrong, or I disagree. Who cares that you disagree? You realize you can silently disagree. When it comes to product management, 90% of my feed on product content, I personally disagree in small ways or larger ways. So should I just keep replying, I disagree, I disagree? You can silently disagree. But why disagree at all? Because even disagreement is a sign. You want to put your stamp out there. Of course, you'll tell yourself you're disagreeing so that the other people understand that this is not true. You're doing it for altruistic reasons. No, you're not. You're just doing it for catharsis and ego. Forget all that disagreement when you are reading this thing. Again, you picked an area, you want to become better at it. Forget disagreement. Just take everything. As you take in this information, now what is inevitably happening is inside you, a model is starting to get formed. Not too different from these LLMs that basically are the basis of all these great AI tools we use these days. You're starting to form your own model, in my case, around strategy. Now, the model is very poor right now because I don't know what the right answer is. But at least now I have a model I can consult. So, what's the second step? Well, I started actually working on formulating strategy for the business I managed at Stripe in this case. So it was the right time. That's why I even started looking at strategy because I knew I needed to create something and share it and get alignment on it across the organization. So now I have this poor model. And now what I'm doing is I'm trying to formulate strategy. This is the key. I am not using somebody's template to create my strategy. Oh, here's a strategy chart. Here's a strategy canvas. Here's a strategy blueprint. I'm not using anything like that. I am using this model. Again, it's not a great model, but it's something. As I use this model, here's the interesting thing that happens. Now I'm relating the actual work I'm doing with the concepts and ideas and recommendations and suggestions from the model. So now I'm getting real world input on where the model is failing and where the model is pointing to something interesting, something that's valid. So what do? I increase the weights of things that I find are valid and interesting, and I mute the weights of things that the model is saying that might be irrelevant. Again, just like how LLMs work, at this point, I don't even remember the source of this. I don't know, oh, it's actually from Blue Ocean Strategy, which a lot of people say is a great book. I don't think it's a very good book. I wouldn't recommend it among the top 5 strategy things you would read. But frankly, it doesn't matter. The reason is, sure, there is one core idea, but the rest of the stuff, it's done to fill the book. So it could have been one paragraph, frankly. The point is, there are all these other things it says, but I find that, oh, there's limited value to that because my human input and the actions I'm performing, like the model is telling me something and I'm like, no, but that's not working for what I'm trying to do. I'm not doing it intentionally. I'm just doing it instinctively. So as I do this, my model becomes better. And I keep doing this over a period of few years. And now my model is really good. When it crosses a certain level of quality, the next thing I do is now I open myself up to more inputs because there's only limited inputs I can get through my own team's work. That's when I start telling people, hey, if you want me to help you with your strategy, just set up a thing on my calendar. I did this at Stripe. Some people took me up on it. You would be surprised. Not many PMs took me up on it, but some did. Now I'm spending more time with other kind of diverse inputs to my model and prompts for my model, which I organically wouldn't have had through the course of my work. So now it gets further better and its development accelerates. You do enough of that, and now you have something that is just world class, where previously it was not present at all. That's the example. Let's take it back to the core question, which is I want you to pick a certain area, broad or narrow, I don't care. In that area, I want you to start evaluating whatever ideas you're running into and creating some kind of model. If you ask like, oh, but how do I create this model? That sounds difficult. No, this is how you're doing everything in your life. Everything in your life is being informed by models you're creating around your experiences. This is built into you. Right now, what happens is there is a layer, a destructive layer that sits in between your consumption of ideas and knowledge and the development of this model. And that layer is your tendency to want to feel smart, your ego, your insecurities, your need for optics. You kind of have to destroy that layer because that's the only way you can create a faithful model. I'll give you a concrete example, say in the case of strategy. What if I sat with the HBR book? I'm being honest, like I'm not very good at strategy. By this time, I'm like director, senior director level person, but I'm not good at product strategy. I'm being honest with you. Most people at that level will not be honest. But what if I then sat and said, oh, yeah, this Michael Porter guy doesn't know what he's talking about early on. Later on, fine. But I'm saying early on, if I said, this Michael Porter guy, like he doesn't know what he's talking about. Or he did all his stuff in the 80s. The world has changed. All his examples are non tech, and tech is different, right? The tech dynamics are different and the tech industry changes and is dynamic and blah, blah, blah. That's that destructive layer. Once I've constructed this model and tweaked it and actually field tested it through my own work, if at that point I say, okay, Michael Porter doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, in this case, he does know what he's talking about. He's one of the few people who knows what they're talking about. But even like I did earlier, which is like, I don't think Blue Ocean Strategy is a great book. I wouldn't recommend it, even though it often gets recommended as one of the top books you should read on strategy if you're in tech. No, you shouldn't. Absolutely, you shouldn't. But I did not conclude that the first time I was reading it because I was still developing my model. Afterwards, sure, I want you to reject these sources. In fact, that was my point. There are sources of authority that are telling you things that are just objectively incorrect, but you can't recognize it because they're running $100 billion company. So therefore, their advice must be right. So that's the process I would recommend going through. And again, the two steps are first, just narrow the scope so that you can preserve your mental energy. How you narrow it is up to you, and what area you pick is up to you. Once you do that, get rid of that destructive layer that sits between the input and the model and let the model form. Now, fine tune that model based on actual work you're doing against the day-to-day work you're doing. Do that for a while. And at some point, this model will be pretty darn good. And once this model gets pretty darn good, you will very clearly see all the nonsense and the misinformation that is out there about topics within that domain. Once you're done with that, move on to the next one. Once you practice this enough on a few different areas, the whole cycle gets quicker. Now you become more of a learning machine. It doesn't take you years. You might reduce the cycle time to like months, maybe eventually weeks. Last thing I'll share here is another interesting thing that'll happen once you kind of informed your model in many different ways is you'll realize that the basic principles are same across everything. So you'll now start seeing those core basic principles, those foundational principles. And once you start seeing that, that's it. Now you are unbeatable because you can figure things out in a new area that many people who have 10, 20 years of experience working in that area can't figure out.